This is NTD Good Morning. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Today's Tuesday, January 13th. You're watching NTD Good Morning. In today's top news, President Trump traveling to Michigan today with stops planned in Detroit and Dearborn as he highlights manufacturing and economic priorities.
The president is set to address the Detroit Economic Club during an event at Motor City Casino.
The club says it will be Trump's third address there. On the campaign trail in 2024, he joined a list of speakers, including former presidents Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, and Bush's senior and junior.
Trump will also tour Ford Motor Company's historic Rouge Center, where the automaker builds its F-Series trucks.
Ford says the visit will showcase American workers, putting the automobile within reach of every American.
Trump was last in Michigan in April of 2025 to celebrate the first 100 days of his second term.
And President Trump vowing that any country doing business with Iran will face a 25% U.S. tariff.
And this comes as the president warns that he may carry out strikes against Iran over its violent repression of anti-regime protests. NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu has more from the White House.
I mean, there's so many of them, and some were shot. Are we getting a full report? I'm getting an hourly report, and we're going to make a determination.
President Trump saying that the U.S. military is weighing some very strong options for intervention in Iran, as reports claim that now over 500 people have been killed in anti-Iranian regime protests.
I think one thing President Trump is very good at is always keeping all of his options on the table, and airstrikes would be one of the many, many options that are on the table for the commander-in-chief. Diplomacy is always the first option for the president.
This comes as the White House confirms President Trump spoke to Elon Musk about restoring the internet in Iran, where authorities have blacked out services since Thursday. President Trump's also threatening Cuba, urging them to make a deal and proclaiming no more oil or money will be sent there post-Maduro's capture.
The president's made it very clear that we don't want to see any more jug boats sailing from Venezuela towards the United States of America, which we have not, frankly, in the last week. President's also made it very clear that only oil tankers that are approved by the United States of America will be flowing from Venezuela, and we will continue to seize ships that are stateless or that are not approved for commerce.
The Venezuelan regime was long propped up by Cuba's armed forces and counterintelligence agencies. And in the 9 days since Maduro's capture, Venezuelans worldwide have been celebrating, with a group outside the White House today singing the Venezuelan national anthem.
We appreciate the Donald Trump decision to take the control of Nicolas Maduro. We want to express he's doing the right thing, and as a Venezuelan, I appreciate what he's doing.
You have a president now that's willing to back you guys up. That goes with the Iranian people. We're with the Iranian people. We're with the Cubans. We're with people from all these countries where they have these dictators and communist movement.
Socialism is a destruction, and we see the same results in different countries as well. So if you apply socialism in the United States, I'm pretty sure you're going to have the same results as Venezuela, as Cuba. We were giving oil to Cuba for free. We were giving oil to China for free. We were giving oil to Russia for free.
Socialism, communism, the same thing. This just brings chaos to life. This country is not for communism. It's not what we stand for. We're here for freedom. We believe in freedom in every sense of the word.
Reporting from the White House, Mari Otsu, NTD News.
Thanks to Mari for that report. And more than 2 weeks into the nationwide protests in Iran, demonstrators appear undeterred despite a brutal crackdown.
The internet blackout there now in its 5th day, and it makes it very challenging to get the full picture on what's actually going on inside of Iran.
What began as demonstrations against inflation and the soaring cost of living have actually spiraled into wider unrest against the Iranian regime there. And that regime has responded with force, arresting thousands of people and vowing to treat them without mercy.
More than 500 protesters have been killed so far, and that's according to a U.S.-based human rights group. NTD's Jason Perry has the details and a warning. This report does contain footage that some viewers may find disturbing.
In a tragic video released over the weekend, a woman could be heard crying as people walked between body bags at a morgue in Tehran. And more body bags were seen outside the morgue as loved ones attempted to identify the bodies. This comes amid a wave of protests that began over Iran's failing economy, but later shifted to oppose the Iranian regime. According to the U.S.-based human rights activist news agency, at least 572 people have died since the protests began, including over 500 protesters and 69 security personnel. That's over 500 more deaths than the human rights group reported just a few days ago. Iran's police chief explained how they're dealing with the protests.
From now on, the police consider the situation to be one of violent unrest only, and will deal with violent rioters decisively, swiftly, and forcefully. Protesters should also be aware that by standing alongside violent agitators, they themselves become victims of the violence caused by these agitators.
According to the U.S. State Department, Chinese companies have assisted Iran in tracking protesters by providing surveillance technologies used for the repression of human rights. And the Iranian regime cut off internet and phone lines in the country last week. Some see the move as a way to help the regime stay in power, making it difficult for outsiders to know the actual situation on the ground. However, a cyber espionage investigator said things could change if President Trump helps put a satellite over Iran to enable cell phone use.
And if President Trump declares an emergency regarding Iran, and he talks to the FCC and Elon Musk, who was also stood with the Iranian people in the past and also now, can activate this service for Iran, I think this solution will turn around everything. And the people will overthrow the regime much sooner than anyone expects.
Jason Perry, NTD News.
The U.S. Embassy in Iran is urging Americans to leave the country immediately if it's safe to do so. It says U.S. citizens should expect continued internet outages and consider leaving by land through neighboring countries.
The embassy says the Iran government has imposed major restrictions on communications and travel, including canceling flights and suspending mobile service, landlines, and the internet. The warning says U.S. nationals are at significant risk of questioning, arrest, and detention in Iran.
And joining us now for insight on the latest in Iran is Middle East expert Michael Pregent. Good to have you with us this morning, Michael. Some of the footage coming out of Iran is really gut-wrenching, though accounts on the ground do vary in severity. What's your sense of life in Iran right now?
Well, we have to take notice of what the Iranian people are willing to risk. And we see these protesters out there knowing that the only way the regime can survive is if it is brutal, if it shoots unarmed civilians, and they're still going out there en masse. I wouldn't call this a crackdown because the regime is not effective. What they're using is brutal tactics to try to suppress the protests. Instead, they're growing. And this is almost, day 14 now. So the United States needs to continue to express support along with Europe, along with the region for the Iranian people. And this needs to continue. The more this continues, the more likely it is that the regime will collapse. And it probably won't take a lot more of this for the regime to collapse, but it needs to be steady. We can't have a voice out there from the administration saying both sides need to calm down like we did with the Obama administration during the Green Revolution. We need to clearly take a side, and it's the side of the people against the regime.
And I do want to look at many of the recent actions of the Trump administration on this front. But we spoke with an analyst yesterday saying that the regime itself might decide to use all of its arsenal of missiles if it really feels like it's close to extinction, perhaps including nuclear war, which the U.S. and others have accused the regime of having and developing. What's your understanding of the capabilities and the perhaps likelihood of that happening?
Well, I think the one thing that the regime hasn't realized yet is that both the United States and Israel are watching for any movements by military forces, whether it's bases that are putting convoys together to go deal with the protesters, or increased missile pre-launch activity. And I think those are the things that when Secretary Hegseth talks about the U.S. being ready, those are the things we're looking at. But, as a veteran of this region, fighting Iran's militias in Iraq and other places, our forces in Iraq are the ones that Iran will likely retaliate against if that happens. So the United States needs to increase its defense posture there with increased air defense assets. But again, I think the regime would be wise not to start signaling that, because that will greenlight U.S. airstrikes and Israeli airstrikes inside of Iran again.
Right, and the regime has also threatened to target U.S. military in the region and also Israel if the U.S. strikes. How much of a threat is that, and how much would it deter those two countries?
Well, we know that Iran has the ability to launch. They can launch drones, launch missiles, and launch rockets. We also know that our allies in the region have the ability to shoot drones, missiles, and rockets down, especially Israel. The United States has an integrated air defense system set that protects Israel, that protects our Gulf allies, and that protects U.S. forces. This type of a launch, I think, would actually further it would make the regime, it would put the regime in a situation where it would start losing any friends it actually has, and it has very few at this point, Russia and China. But I think the regime, that would be a nice problem for the regime to have, to be able to launch missiles at Israel. Right now, they are focused on these protests. These protests are happening in places they've never happened before. They're happening in places where the regime is supposed to be strong. And this momentum needs to continue. And the only way it'll stop is if the Western press and Western governments urge calm from both sides. Okay. That is the killer language right there. You have to take a side, and it's with the Iranian people against this regime.
And to that point, the regime has been clamping down on any ability for protesters or any Iranians to get information out there to the world. Of course, some of that has been clawed back or given back in small amounts in recent moments. But does Starlink, which has been floated as an idea by the Trump administration, have the capability to overcome the regime's jamming, which we assume is not really going to come back in full anytime soon?
Right. So this is what the U.S. can do. It has to keep the lights on. It has to keep the internet up. It has to keep Western media aware of what's going on. And the Iranian people, again, they're the best broadcasters of this revolution, because they're the ones getting all the images out, all the videos out. Everything that we're seeing is from the Iranian people, and they're getting it out. So I do believe that other U.S. allies close to Iran are helping with the internet push to get those things out. But yes, Elon Musk, Starlink, all that stuff needs to be up, and the U.S. needs to use its technology, its cyber capabilities, to ensure that the Iranians are not able to jam these networks on the ground. They're not going to be able to jam the satellite necessarily, but they can jam the receivers on the ground.
And just lastly,
and that's the issue.
President Trump
and they're confiscating them too when they find them.
Yes. Yeah, yes. Just terrifying, really. The Trump administration announced a 25% penalty on or tariff on countries that do business with the regime. China, of course, is a major buyer of Iranian oil, which supports the regime in a major way. If the U.S. were to seize more of that oil, how could that impact the regime and the protests?
Well, one of the things I've argued is that we should not attack infrastructure right now, because the regime has never been this close to collapsing, and that infrastructure needs to be in place for the day after. And the U.S. needs to identify the talent on the ground that have put skin in the game to overthrow this regime and have them form the next government. When it comes to Iran's oil, we know that China's bankrolling Iran. Without China, Iran would collapse. They have a $400 billion economy that is sustained. And China's even having a hard time sustaining Iran's economy. It's all about gas and oil, and it's all about focusing on that. Let's hurt the regime now while it's in power. Let's increase sanctions. Let's punish those allies and frenemies that are working with Iran with tariffs and sanctions, secondary sanctions. But let's keep the infrastructure available for the day after. For the next government. And some people will say, well, what about the next government? What if it's worse than this one? It's not going to be worse than this one. This one is the worst Iran has ever had. And if the regime collapses, it also means the Revolutionary Guard collapsed. This is not going to be a government of Islamic Revolutionary Guard members, because they would have failed if the regime collapses to begin with, meaning they're the ones sustaining it. If the regime collapses, they've lost also.
Well, hopefully the Iranian people do see a better day, and soon. Thank you so much, Michael Pregent. Good to speak with you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And President Trump is set to meet with the Venezuelan opposition leader later this week as the administration warns Americans in Venezuela to, quote, leave the country immediately. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has the details.
Venezuelan opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado met with Pope Leo at the Vatican during an audience that was not previously listed on the Pope's calendar. Machado asked the Pope to press the Venezuelan regime for the liberation of all political prisoners in Venezuela. Since the removal of Nicolás Maduro, only a handful of the nearly 1,000 political prisoners in Venezuela have been released.
We feel worried as family members. In what sense? We need a proof of life to be issued so we can verify that our relatives are truly still alive. We need the government to issue that proof of life so we can be certain they are alive. What's happening? If this proof of life cannot be issued, which is the only thing we are asking for, then give us the opportunity to access the facilities and see our relatives.
President Trump is set to meet with Maria Corina Machado this Thursday, and President Trump has also left the door open to the possibility of meeting with the Venezuelan regime's interim leader, Delcy Rodriguez.
Venezuela is really working out well. We're working along really well with their leadership, and we'll see how it all works out. At some point I'll meet. Yeah, she's been very good. Look, she asked us, can we take 50 million barrels of oil? And I said, yes, we can. It's $4.2 billion. And it's on its way right now to the United States.
The Venezuelan regime is in negotiations with the Trump administrations to reestablish diplomatic ties, and they're doing so through the government of Qatar.
I want to thank the Emir of Qatar, who during the hardest hours when Venezuelan was being attacked, he, his government and his prime minister helped us to obtain the proof of life of the president, Nicolás Maduro, and the first combatant, Celia Flores. I want to thank them in the name of the president and the people of Venezuela for facilitating the creation of a channel between the US and Venezuelan governments. I know you are helping in a work agenda for it to be useful for both parties involved.
Despite attempts to normalize diplomatic relations, the United States government has warned its citizens to leave Venezuela immediately amid reports of paramilitary forces known as colectivos in Venezuela that are setting up roadblocks in search of American citizens. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Thanks to Luis for that report. Coming up, a couple of Republican senators say they will block President Trump's Federal Reserve nominees. They're protesting the DOJ's investigation into Fed Chair Jerome Powell. President Trump denying knowledge of the investigation.
And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says Minnesota fraud is much larger than expected, with benefits turned into businesses and people gaming the system. We're going to have that and more. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. The Department of Homeland Security is facing legal challenges over immigration enforcement in Minnesota. The state suing the Trump administration over ICE deployments.
The lawsuit comes amid protests following the fatal shooting of a woman by an ICE agent. Here's more on that.
Minnesota is suing the federal government over a surge in ICE agents to the Twin Cities. The state is calling it unconstitutional and unlawful. The lawsuit names Secretary Kristi Noem and alleges DHS is targeting Minnesota for political reasons.
We allege that the obvious targeting of Minnesota for our diversity, for our democracy, and our differences of opinion with the federal government is a violation of the Constitution and of federal law.
The department is pushing back, saying immigration and customs enforcement is federal law enforcement and belongs everywhere that federal law applies. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons told Fox News yesterday that ICE is present in all 50 states, and law enforcement in states like Texas and Florida cooperate with ICE instead of opposing it.
If we have ICE agents or deportation officers that are being harassed and impeded, their state law enforcement, local law enforcement actually comes to the aid of ICE, not turn down our 911 calls, not show up to a protest. We only are increasing our numbers because ICE agents are getting attacked due to the lax policies that Minnesota has.
Lyons also said that Minnesota is a sanctuary state.
They don't honor our detainers, and they release criminals back into the neighborhood.
In a press release yesterday, DHS said ICE has removed child abusers, drug traffickers, and domestic violence perpetrators from Minnesota's streets. Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin said the department will not let rioters or sanctuary politicians slow it down from arresting and removing the worst of the worst in Minnesota.
Illinois also unveiled a lawsuit yesterday. It accuses the administration of creating turmoil and imposing a climate of fear in the state and in the city of Chicago.
The Department of Homeland Security did not immediately respond to that lawsuit.
And a New York City Council employee was detained by ICE during a routine immigration appointment on Long Island yesterday.
The Department of Homeland Security says he was there illegally and did not have work authorization.
But according to reports, Council Speaker Julie Menin said the employee, a Venezuelan national, works as a data analyst and has a work visa. She called the detainment government overreach.
DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin disputed those remarks, and she said he has a criminal record, including for assault.
In a post on X, New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani called the arrest an assault on democracy, on New York City, and on our values.
He called for the employee's release, and he said he would continue to monitor the situation.
And an update on alleged widespread fraud in Minnesota. In an exclusive interview, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says investigators have uncovered schemes far larger than expected with illegally obtained taxpayer funds sent overseas.
NTD's Daniel Monahan has the key takeaways from Bessent's interview with Blaze TV host Christopher Rufo.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says Minnesota has become a blueprint for uncovering similar fraud nationwide.
The American people are the most generous people in the world. You just can't take advantage of us. When immigrants come here, you got to learn which side of the road to drive on, customs and laws to follow, and that you cannot steal from the U.S. government the way you did from your government.
Bessent says fraudsters have set up an organized scheme to game the system.
Benefits have been turned into businesses. It is a cottage industry of teaching people how to form multiple LLCs, how to game the system, how to move money around, and we'll see where the money goes.
The Treasury Secretary raised concerns about what he calls massive leakage of public assistance funds leaving the country.
If you are on public assistance and you are sending money out of the country, one of two things must be true. You are getting too much assistance because you have excess funds to feed yourself, your family, food, clothing, or you've got stolen money and you're sending that out. But in either case, money needs to stay in the U.S. or your benefits need to be cut.
Bessent touched on potential cover-ups, saying there are evidently tapes of Attorney General Keith Ellison in meetings with people who donated to him.
Them calling for political favors to stop the investigations. So we'll see. But again, I don't want to get out ahead of the investigations. It's going to be very methodical. And Chris, I can guarantee you, when the bear trap snaps, we're going to get these folks.
The Treasury Secretary says his interview was originally planned at the Minnesota State Capitol, but Governor Tim Walz refused to guarantee Bessent would be provided any police security.
He is afraid of what is coming, and he's not going to be able to hide behind this curtain because we will get there, and I don't have to go in the Capitol building to investigate him. I would love for him to come to Treasury and answer some questions. I can guarantee you that he will be safe and sound then, depending on what we discover. I don't know about his future.
Bessent also discussed an alleged bribery attempt.
One of the Somali fraudsters tried to bribe a juror with $120,000. Well, it turned out she'd been given $200,000 to bribe the juror, and she skimmed $80,000.
Bessent further warned that protests obstructing federal law enforcement appear coordinated and funded.
Someone is financing them. There are safe houses that when you see the 300 people with the same laser that they're using to blind DHS agents in courthouses in Portland, someone bought those lasers. And again, what we do is follow the money.
The Treasury Secretary talked about all the luxury cars and properties bought from Minnesota to East Africa.
How the hell did this happen? How did it happen? Like, President Trump is outraged, I'm outraged, the American people should be outraged.
The Treasury has announced that IRS civil enforcement teams are auditing financial institutions suspected of facilitating the laundering of Minnesota fraud proceeds.
In addition, the IRS will soon launch a dedicated task force to work alongside criminal investigators and prosecutors to recover funds and prevent fraudulent nonprofits from exploiting federal programs. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
A couple of GOP senators say they will block President Trump's Federal Reserve nominees after the DOJ launched an investigation into Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. NTD's Melina Weisskopf joins us now. Melina, good morning. Tell us more about the investigation and why these lawmakers are pushing back.
Hi, good morning, Steph. So Republican senators, including Lisa Murkowski and Tom Tillis, are questioning the authenticity of the investigation you mentioned. It's into Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Now, in a bid to urge officials to quickly resolve this case, they're now vowing to block President Trump's Federal Reserve nominees. Listen to Tillis, one of those who is leading the effort.
I very seldom disagree with the president, but I've disagreed with bad advice he's been given and acted on. He has publicly said he wasn't aware of this.
Now, indeed, President Trump has denied knowledge of the investigation, though he previously threatened legal action against Powell, accusing him of incompetence. Senator Murkowski, the latest to join Tillis in this effort, said that this went so far as to call this investigation an act of coercion. So she said that because this investigation is centered around project cost overruns, which she says are not unusual, then she says that Congress actually needs to investigate the Department of Justice here. Senate Leader John Thune said that he expects more senators to follow the lead of these two, which are choosing to block the nominations. Responding to the investigation, he said it's really important that you get it resolved quickly and that there not be any appearance of political interference with the Fed or its activities. Now, remember, just to recap what this investigation is about, the Department of Justice launched an investigation into Chairman Powell's handling of the renovation of the Federal Reserve's headquarters. They're specifically looking into whether Powell committed perjury, which senators note is a very serious accusation. That's when he testified to a Senate committee about the project last year. This project was originally approved for a budget of $1.9 billion, but now it's costing around $2.5 billion of taxpayer money. The Fed's inspectors said that this is due to timeline extensions and material costs. The White House Economic Council director yesterday told reporters at the White House that even if cost overruns on projects aren't out of the ordinary, it's still important to know where taxpayer money goes. Listen to him.
Seems like the Justice Department has decided that they want to see what's going on over there with this building that's, massively more expensive than any building in the history of Washington. And if I were Fed chair, I would want them to do that. I think that it's really important to understand where the taxpayer money goes and to understand why it goes this way or that.
Now, Chairman Powell was quick to deny the allegations of the suit and said that the Trump administration only launched this lawsuit because he refused to lower interest rates to a level that President Trump is happy with. Now, some Republicans aren't comfortable with the appearance of this investigation. Others say that it's serious and warranted, Speaker Johnson among them. Chairman Powell, though, will be replaced in just a few months. His term ends in May, Steph.
Thank you so much for keeping us updated this morning. NTD congressional correspondent Melina Weisskopf.
A lot to look out for there.
Certainly. And the Supreme Court will hear arguments today on whether male athletes can compete in female sports if they claim they're transgender.
Yeah, many female athletes at a press conference yesterday, they said that allowing males into their sport, it's not only unfair, but it's also unsafe. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley brings us more from the Supreme Court.
The fate of girls and women's sports may ultimately rest in a decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. The High Court on Tuesday for the first time is weighing in on whether boys and men who say that they're transgender can compete in female sports. 29 states, the NCAA, and the U.S. Olympic Committee all have bans on transgender athletes competing. As far as the Republicans' Attorneys General Association goes, they're urging the High Court to uphold the state bans, saying it's a matter of fairness.
Women and girls should feel safe in the locker rooms and have the opportunity to participate in fair competitions.
Federal judges in West Virginia and Idaho have ruled that banning boys from girls' sports is a civil rights violation that discriminates based on sex. Officials in those states and beyond are calling on the justices to reverse those decisions.
I've spoken with parents all across my state, thousands of parents, and these are parents from both political parties. I found that this is one issue on which they agree, the issue of ensuring fairness and a level playing field for our girls when it comes to sports.
Many female athletes who had to compete against or alongside boys and men say that this is a matter of protecting women.
5 times I lost to a male athlete who identifies as a female.
I know they run faster, kick the ball harder, and foul with much more force.
They watched a boy slam the ball in our faces. There were plenty of opportunities for this boy to play at the boys' courts on the other side of the convention center, where, mind you, the nets are over 7 inches higher than our nets.
Women's sports exist because men and women are biologically different. At the Paris Olympics, male athletes won gold medals in women's boxing, and the women who objected were shamed.
Can we as women call ourselves champions? Can we allow ourselves to be vulnerable in an intimate area of undressing, such as a locker room, without having to fear a man walking into that space?
Why will little girls even bother to compete at a certain point when they know that it doesn't matter to our institutions, that it isn't fair for them?
President Trump signed an executive order last February that pulls federal funds from any institution that allows males to compete in female sports. Several schools across the country subsequently reversed their rules, banning transgender athletes from competing. The arguments in Tuesday's hearing and the judge's comments on which way they're leaning may just give us a sense of where girls and women's sports lie ahead for the future here in the U.S. Reporting from the Supreme Court, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Thanks to Jack for that report. And the Department of Homeland Security is setting up a new office ahead of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. The new office, announced yesterday, aims to speed up the deployment of drones, counter-drone systems as well. It also plans to complete a $115 million deal this week for counter-drone tools for security at America 250. That, of course, the 250th anniversary of the country's independence, as well as the 2026 FIFA World Cup. It's expected to be the biggest World Cup event ever, and it's jointly hosted, of course, by the United States along with Mexico and Canada. 11 of the 16 host cities are in the U.S., and DHS says the new office will guide investment in drone technology as well as address the growing use of drones by criminals.
Still to come, nurses in New York City are on the strike, the largest nurse strike in the city's history.
Nearly 15,000 hospital workers walked off the job as the union says talks have stalled. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. President Trump is vowing that any country doing business with Iran will face a 25% U.S. tariff. And this follows earlier warnings that the U.S. may carry out strikes over Iran's repression of protests in the country. The White House also confirmed that President Trump spoke to Elon Musk about restoring the internet in Iran, where authorities have blacked out services beginning last Thursday. Rights groups say nearly 600 people are now dead since the protests began, and the U.S. is advising Americans to leave Iran now. Minnesota is suing the federal government over a surge of ICE agents in the Twin Cities, calling it unconstitutional as well as politically targeted. The state says it is being singled out for political differences. Federal officials push back. They say ICE operates in all 50 states, and Minnesota's sanctuary policies are making the surge necessary. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says alleged fraud schemes in Minnesota are far larger than were originally expected. with taxpayer funds illegally sent overseas. In an exclusive interview, Bessent called Minnesota a blueprint for uncovering nationwide fraud, and he's vowing to prosecute offenders and recover the stolen funds. Meanwhile, the Treasury and the IRS are expanding their audits and launching new enforcement actions to stop the abuse. In the Supreme Court today, we'll hear arguments on whether male athletes can compete in female sports while claiming to be transgender. Federal judges in West Virginia and Idaho have ruled that banning boys from girls' sports is a civil rights violation, and it discriminates based on sex. The Republican Attorneys General Association is urging the High Court to uphold the state bans. It's calling it a matter of fairness. Currently, 29 states, the NCAA, and the U.S. Olympic Committee all have bans on transgender athletes competing. Those are this morning's top headlines. With that, Steph, over to you.
Thank you, Carrie. Thousands of nurses at several major New York City hospitals are now on strike. The walkout began yesterday morning after negotiations over the weekend failed to yield a breakthrough. The affected hospitals include New York Presbyterian, Montefiore, and Mount Sinai. NTD Sean Marshall has the details.
United, we'll never be defeated.
Nurses with the New York State Nurses Association picketed outside hospitals across New York City on Monday, calling for safer staffing levels, improved working conditions, and a fair contract.
We are participating in the historic largest nurses strike in New York City today, and we're doing that because we're advocating for our patients, for better care and safety while they're in the hospital.
Union officials say the strike followed months of bargaining in which hospital management failed to make progress on what nurses described as core issues, including staffing levels, health care benefits, and workplace safety.
It is so important for us to strike as nurses because we do not have enough support. We do not have enough nurses. There's too many patients. There's not enough nurses. We are spread so thin. I want to spend more time with my patients. I want to be able to be at bedside, but I can't because I'm running around from room to room to room to room. And it's not enough. We need more support. We need more nurses.
New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani joined the nurses and urged a return to negotiations.
New Yorkers have a right to quality health care, as do the nurses who provide that care. My job as mayor is to protect both of those rights.
Mamdani called on hospital management and the union to bargain in good faith and reach an agreement that allows nurses who work in this city to live in this city. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
The hospitals affected by the nurses' strike say the union's demands are unaffordable.
Mount Sinai called the requests extreme, and Montefiore called them reckless.
New York Presbyterian said the union called the strike to create disruption, but said it's ready to keep negotiating a, quote, fair and resolvable contract. Next, the Trump administration is stepping in to address higher electricity bills tied to the growing power demands of data centers.
President Trump says Microsoft will be the first company to act, with changes expected to begin this week.
In a Truth Social post, the president said his administration is working with major technology companies to secure their commitment and will have much to announce in the coming weeks.
Trump says it's the data centers that are critical to economic growth, but that the tech companies should cover their own power costs.
Microsoft has not publicly responded to Trump's comments, though the company has previously said it works to prevent data centers from driving up local electricity prices.
Now, the issue comes as data centers account for a growing share of U.S. electricity use amid a push to expand artificial intelligence infrastructure.
And Elon Musk's X is facing growing scrutiny after reports that its AI chatbot Grok was used to generate non-consensual, sexualized images of women and children.
Several countries have taken action, with regulators investigating or blocking access to the tool. NTD's Christina Corona brings us more on that.
The UK's media regulator, Ofcom, has launched an investigation into Elon Musk's Grok AI chatbot following reports that the tool was used to create sexually explicit deepfake images, including those involving minors. The British government is set to enforce a new law this week that criminalizes creating sexual deepfakes, calling the content a form of online abuse.
The Internet Watch Foundation reports criminal imagery of children as young as 11, including girls sexualized and topless. This is child sexual abuse.
Kendall says reports show images of women in bikinis as well as in abusive and disturbing situations. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has called the images disgusting and unlawful.
Lives can and have been devastated by this content, which is designed to harass, torment, and violate people's dignity.
European Union officials have also condemned the platform, warning tech companies they will act if users are not protected. They say regulators can take action and issue fines if rules aren't followed.
They can investigate the service, they can issue enforcement action, and if that enforcement action is not complied with, they can fine the platform £18 million or 10% of their worldwide revenue, whichever is greater.
Southeast Asian countries are also taking action. Indonesia and Malaysia have temporarily blocked access to Grok, citing risks to women, children, and public safety. However, Elon Musk has responded, saying X removes the illegal content, stating, "We take action against illegal content on X, including child sexual abuse material, by removing it permanently, suspending accounts, and working with local governments and law enforcement as necessary." He goes on to say, anyone using or prompting Grok to make illegal content will suffer the same consequences as if they upload illegal content. Musk made almost exactly the same statement on January 3rd. Christina Corona, NTD News.
How's your New Year's resolutions going? If you're wavering now, you're not alone. But stay tuned, we have a healthy dose of inspiration coming up.
That's right, we're going to be joined by an ordinary man who's been able to achieve extraordinary things through mental discipline. And he's going to share how his own big, hairy goal and give you the motivation you need to achieve your goals. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. We are already halfway through January. Can you believe it, Carrie?
No.
I know. All right, well, by now, you may be wavering a little in your New Year's resolutions if you made them. Maybe you want to be healthier, or maybe you didn't make New Year's resolutions, but you are looking for motivation to optimize your health, like Carrie.
That's right. Yeah, no goals, but
Right.
always looking to improve. And
Yeah.
our next guest is just the person for that. He's got the inspiration you need. He believes the key to success doesn't start with the physical body, but it's with the mind. I'm pleased to welcome to the show Bal Joshi. He's AKA the Running Monk. Welcome, Bal.
Good to have you with us today. Now, doing hard stuff does start with goal setting often. So tell us about this kind of extreme challenge that you're about to embark on.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story and journey. The next challenge that I'm about to take on is called World Marathon Challenge. It is 7 days, 7 full marathons, and 7 continents. So you run 7 different continents in 7 consecutive days, and you run full 7 marathon in each continent. So it is it's definitely a challenge, and I'm not doing it to prove anything. It's just to find what my boundaries are. Most of the time, we are limited by own perceived boundaries, and that's what I'm trying to find out.
Bal, we had a colleague who ran the New York City Marathon. He was sore for more than days, probably into like the second week. How are you? What is your approach? How are you preparing to take this on?
See, it's more than it's much more mental than it's physical. Most of the marathons are run, 70% is mental and 30% is everything else. It's about finding that passion, it's about finding that courage, it's about finding that reason and finding the purpose to do what you want to do, whether it's running a 1 full marathon or 7 marathons in 7 days, or doing anything extraordinary in your life, whether it's work or personal life. So it's about balancing it. It's about finding that rhythm, not just focusing on pace. And maintaining it. In running, rest and recovery are more important than actually training. So I'm more focused on balancing all aspects of life while I'm trying to achieve this.
That's so inspiring. So to that point, you're actually not even a professional athlete. You're a banker from Dallas. So how did you come to take on these kinds of extreme fitness challenges in the first place?
Thank you. A great question. Yes, I am. I'm a banker. I live spreadsheets and numbers and financials and balance sheet and profit and loss. That's what I do for a living. Now, if you really think about that in life or running, it's a kind of the same thing. So my assets and is my personal goal, personal achievement, and how I balance that with my liabilities. That's kind of where I found the running aspect of my life, where I decided to kind of contribute to the running world by running one marathon each time. Now, what it does, it teaches you to balance it. Life is all about balance. Same thing with business. Business is all about managing the balance, managing the risk. Running is all about managing the risk, because if you run too fast in one race, well, you might have exposed to yourself too much of risk for the next race. So it's finding that middle ground where it makes sense for us to do what we do. That's how I got into the running, and I'm not a long. I was not born to run, perhaps. I didn't learn running in my early childhood, my early days. I started running just 4.5 years ago. So this is a new hobby, new passion for me. So the point I'm trying to make here is, despite of your profession, despite of your age, if you do decide to do something different that you have never done before, it is possible. And that is all I'm trying to find, whether it is possible or not.
Paul, that is so inspiring and such a different message, because the message is always like, push yourself beyond your limits and growth will happen. And you're kind of saying, no, like there's harmony in the balance sheet and get to the middle. So what would you go by the Running Monk on Instagram. What would the Running Monk say to somebody who does feel stuck and they feel like they can't, get out of whatever malaise they're in, and, whether it's health or it's some other aspect that they're trying to improve in their life?
Yeah, no, thank you. So my philosophy of life and running both is my race, my pace. And let me repeat that, is my race, my pace. I run my pace at my own pace that is comfortable to me. Same thing with life as well. So instead of looking at somebody else that has done an amazing amount of work, and then comparing myself with that and thinking low or thinking down, instead of doing all of that, let's find our own pace, let's find our own challenge, let's find our own rhythm, and let's find out our own marathon. When I say marathon, not necessarily I'm talking about running. I'm talking about the marathon of life. We do run our races every single day, whether we recognize it or not. Now, you mentioned something about people who got stuck. I'm happy to share, no one is actually stuck. We are drifted. That's the only difference. No one is stuck. We are just sidetracked, perhaps, or drifted. So we just bring ourselves back and then just do one at a time. Don't try to conquer the Mount Everest on day one. Let's start with one step at a time. And remember, it's your race and you run at your own condition, not somebody else.
Bal Joshi, such an inspiration. You can follow Bal on Instagram at The Running Monk, and good luck with the 777 World Marathon Challenge. Thank you for motivating us. We're going to be watching, and we wish you all the best in your race.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, what an innovative approach, but one I think that is really quite universal.
I know. I mean, we always see these professional athletes achieving great things. And while it's great to watch that, the story of sort of a normal guy who is able to achieve extraordinary things, in some ways, that's even more inspiring.
Yeah, and calling it at your own pace when it is so extraordinary.
Your race, your pace. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Great inspiration. Well, we do have to end the show here, but if there are any other stories like Bal's that you may know of and you'd like us to cover it, shoot us an email. We want to cover that story. Shoot us an email at goodmorning@ntd.com.
And for round-the-clock original news coverage, you can watch us live at ntd.com/live, or just download our NTD app. I'm Stephanie Cox.
I'm Carrie Dunst. Have a great day.